But remember that David and Goliath were not just fighting on their own behalf, right? Do you remember that part of the story? Goliath, the word that the ESV uses in its translation, Goliath was the champion of the Philistines. He was their champion. And Goliath comes down there. You have the two armies on two mountains with a valley in between, remember? And Goliath comes down into the valley and he roars out his challenge to the Israeli army, right? The Israelite army. And he says, now you send down your champion. You send down somebody and we'll fight. And instead of all of both armies fighting, whoever wins is going to enslave on behalf of his people the other army, right? And so it's just two champions fighting on behalf of their people, right? And of course we know the story that David does win that, and the Philistines don't exactly hold to the bargain. They flee. They don't just submit to slavery. They flee. But the point is that you have two champions, and they fight each other on behalf of their people. And that is, I think, a helpful picture to have when you come to Luke chapter 4. That we understand that this is not just Jesus versus the devil. These are two champions descending into the valley to do battle on behalf of their people. Up to this point, Satan has proven a formidable foe. The reason that I asked Brian to read Genesis 3 is that you might consider that the first time the devil descended into the valley. He descended with the first Adam. And Adam was our champion. He was the head of the human race, right? And Adam didn't fare so well. Adam descended into the valley. Adam fought the devil. Adam lost. And because of that, Romans 5 in particular, 1 Corinthians 15 talks about this. Because of that, the entire human race is plunged into slavery, just like Israel and the Philistines, into slavery to sin and death. And you've got thousands of years intervening, but then a new Son of God goes into the valley. And a new Son of God fights the battle, and this Son of God wins. And He sets free His people behind Him on the mountain. Now understand this, get this, there's a danger, and I've done this, I shared it with the prayer team this week. Sometimes we are too quick to read ourselves into a Bible passage. Matt Chandler's got kind of a famous sermon on the internet you could find where he says, he says, "You're not David, bro." Like if we read David and Goliath and, oh, this is how we slay our giants, and here are the 5 stones. That's really good exegesis. Here are the 5 stones you need to slay your giants, and you're like David and you can win. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing about David we couldn't learn from, but that's not the point. Are you out there? You and I are a lot more like the cowards up on the mountaintop than we're like David down in the valley. We need a champion. We need a victor. And Jesus comes down into the valley to be that victor. And I fear that Luke 4, we read this and our first thought is, oh, this is how we fight temptation. This is how we win the battle against sin. We just follow the example of Jesus. Folks, we can't follow. That's not the point of this. Jesus won a battle that you and I couldn't win. He's our champion. He's our representative. He's our new Adam. He's the victor. The application of this is not primarily, let's imitate Jesus. The application of this is primarily, let's worship Jesus. Let's praise Jesus. Let's thank Jesus. He's the victor we so desperately needed. And only in that, I say primarily the application is worship Jesus. And when that's primary, then we discover that this Jesus that we worship is not only our champion, He's our helper when we're tempted. So when we worship, we also find a helper. But don't get those backwards. Here's why. I think one of the things, look, let me say this. If my main problem with sin is that it makes me look bad, if my main issue with my sin is that I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed because it shows how weak and how, undisciplined and how this is what a loser I am because I keep losing in my battle against sin. If that's my main problem, then the main reason that I'll fight sin is for my glory, to make myself look better instead of to make Him look better. And understand this, God doesn't give victory over temptation so that you look good. God gives victory over temptation so that His Son looks glorious. So what this text should do is drive us to Jesus, to plead with Him. We need far more than an example of fighting temptation. We need Jesus. Conclusion of this whole matter is very simply this: the temptation and triumph of Jesus is not primarily about our imitation of Him. It is primarily about our worship of Him, our trust in Him, our seeking of Him.